The courtroom was buzzing with the usual early morning chatter, a mix of lawyers, clerks, and spectators finding their seats before the judge arrived. The sunlight spilled through tall windows, catching the dust in the air, and the murmurs seemed louder against the solemn wooden panels of the room. It was a typical Tuesday morning in this mid-sized city courthouse, but for those who would be there in the coming hour, it was about to become anything but ordinary. A young teenager stepped through the double doors of the courtroom, his steps deliberate but calm. He carried only a small briefcase, and his suit, while neat and slightly oversized for his age, gave him a formal and almost professional appearance. People glanced at him and whispered among themselves, "Who was this kid?" Everyone assumed he was there as an observer, or maybe a family member. Few could imagine what was about to unfold. The teenager walked to the counsel table with quiet confidence. He didn't fidget. His eyes scanned the courtroom, noting the judge's bench, the jury seating, and the various lawyers moving with the rhythm of routine. There was no panic in his movements, no signs of nervousness, only a calm awareness. The court clerk called the session to order, and the judge entered with the usual gravity, his robe flowing, gavel in hand. The room quieted immediately, and all eyes turned toward the bench. When the judge saw the teenager sitting at the counsel table, he raised an eyebrow, a slight smirk forming at the corner of his mouth. He leaned forward slightly, resting his chin on one hand, and addressed the boy directly. "And who do we have here? Are you planning to argue a case, or are you just here to observe, young man?" His tone carried a hint of amusement, as if the very idea of a teenager speaking in court was laughable. The teenager looked at the judge steadily, his posture unshaken. He responded with a calm, clear voice. "Your Honor, I am here to represent my client in this matter." A few whispers ran through the courtroom. The judge's smirk widened, but there was now a flicker of curiosity. He leaned back slightly, as if to study the young face in front of him more closely. "Very well then. Let's see what you have. But don't take too long. I've seen many adults struggle to make a coherent argument. I hope you're not wasting my time." The teenager simply nodded, placing his briefcase on the table and opening it with careful precision. Inside, neatly organized folders and documents lay in order, evidence carefully labeled and ready. It was clear he had prepared, not casually but meticulously. He pulled out a set of notes and took a moment to glance over them before placing them back neatly. The spectators leaned forward in their seats, intrigued. It was unusual, almost unheard of, to see someone so young presenting a case. The murmurs grew, not out of disrespect but out of curiosity. Some shook their heads in disbelief, while others exchanged knowing looks, silently acknowledging that there was something extraordinary about this teenager. The opposing counsel, a seasoned lawyer with years of courtroom experience, exchanged a glance with his assistant. He tried to suppress a smirk but couldn't entirely hide it. He had dealt with difficult cases and clever opponents before, but this was a different kind of challenge. Could a teenager actually argue a case effectively? He wasn't going to underestimate him, but he certainly didn't expect brilliance. The judge tapped the gavel lightly. "All right, young man. Let's hear your opening statement. Make it brief. Impress me if you can." The teenager took a deep breath, not of nervousness but of readiness. He stood, squared his shoulders, and began speaking. His voice was calm, clear, and steady. He outlined the case with precision, each word chosen carefully, each point connected logically. He didn't rush, nor did he hesitate. The courtroom, initially skeptical, now found themselves drawn in by the clarity and intelligence in his voice. He cited facts, statutes, and precedents with ease, showing that he had done far more than just skim the case. The judge, initially leaning back with an amused expression, now leaned forward slightly, his eyes narrowing as he listened more intently. There was a pause in the courtroom as the teenager presented a particularly compelling argument, and even the opposing counsel frowned, recognizing the depth of preparation and understanding behind the words. The teenager anticipated counter-arguments, addressing them before they could be raised. He spoke not with arrogance, but with a quiet confidence that demanded attention. Every point he made was supported by evidence and reason. The courtroom, once ready to dismiss him as a novelty, began to take him seriously. Murmurs quieted, and the focus shifted entirely to the young attorney in the suit, carrying only a briefcase but wielding knowledge far beyond his years. The judge, struggling to maintain a neutral expression, interjected at one point. "And you truly believe this will hold in court?" he asked, a hint of incredulity in his voice. The teenager met his gaze evenly. "Your Honor, I am confident the evidence and the law support this position." A few jurors exchanged surprised glances. There was something about the teenager's composure, his ability to command attention without demanding it, that was disarming. He didn't need theatrics. His intelligence and preparation spoke for themselves. The judge, still holding back a full smile of respect, tried to challenge him further. "Do you understand the potential consequences if your argument fails?" he asked, his tone slightly softer now. The teenager nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. I am prepared to take responsibility for my arguments and the outcome." It was a statement that made even the opposing counsel pause. Most adults would hesitate under that level of scrutiny. But here was a teenager handling the pressure with grace and clarity. As the opening statement concluded, a ripple of quiet admiration spread through the courtroom. Some spectators even leaned forward, trying to absorb every detail. The opposing lawyer, normally confident and unshaken, now approached his table with a more serious demeanor. The judge cleared his throat, a sound of both acknowledgement and surprise, realizing that this was no ordinary appearance in his courtroom. He had been mocked by the boy in a sense, by his mere presence and competence. The teenager returned to his seat, placing his notes back in the briefcase neatly. He did not boast or seek attention. He simply sat calmly, prepared to continue with the case. His calm confidence had shifted the atmosphere in the room. What had begun as amusement and skepticism had turned into cautious respect and genuine curiosity. Outside the courtroom, in the hallways and waiting areas, whispers spread. Who was this teenager? How had someone so young prepared so thoroughly and spoken with such authority? People began to wonder if they had just witnessed something rare, something extraordinary, even historic. Inside the courtroom, the judge finally allowed a small, genuine smile to break through. He leaned forward, tapping his gavel lightly to regain control of the room. "Proceed with the evidence," he instructed, a new tone of respect in his voice. The teenager nodded, retrieving documents with careful precision. Every movement was deliberate, every gesture controlled, reflecting an intelligence and discipline far beyond his age. As he began presenting the first pieces of evidence, the courtroom leaned in. Witnesses, lawyers, and spectators alike were captivated. The initial shock of seeing a teenager argue in court had transformed into genuine engagement. People were no longer talking quietly among themselves. They were focused, paying attention to every word, every detail. The teenager questioned the witnesses methodically, each question designed to reveal the truth and support his case. He listened carefully to answers, responding thoughtfully, never impatient, never dismissive. His approach was meticulous, respectful, and sharp. The courtroom, once ready to mock, now quietly admired his skill. The judge watched, alternating between moments of surprise and admiration. He had underestimated the teenager at first, seeing only age and appearance, not realizing the depth of preparation and talent behind those youthful eyes. The judge's earlier skepticism slowly melted into respect, though he kept his expression neutral to maintain authority. By the time the first witness had finished testifying, the energy in the room had changed completely. The teenager's presence was no longer a curiosity. It was a force. The courtroom was attuned to his arguments, his questions, and his presentation of evidence. Each point he made was logical, precise, and compelling, leaving little room for doubt about his abilities. As part one of the story drew to a close, the stage was set for the next phase of the trial. The teenager had successfully transformed perception, turning skepticism into admiration and curiosity into focused attention. The courtroom, once ready to dismiss him, now waited with quiet anticipation for what would come next. The lesson was clear. Appearances can be deceiving, and brilliance can arrive in the most unexpected forms. This teenager, calm, confident, and meticulously prepared, had already begun to leave an indelible mark on everyone present, setting the stage for the remarkable events that were about to unfold in the trial. The courtroom had settled into a quiet tension after the teenager's opening statement. Everyone was still absorbing what they had just witnessed. Whispers had faded, replaced by focused attention. The initial amusement and skepticism were gone. Now there was curiosity and a growing sense of respect. People were realizing that this was no ordinary appearance. This teenager was something extraordinary. The judge cleared his throat, trying to maintain authority. "We will proceed with the presentation of evidence," he said, his voice firm but tinged with interest. The teenager rose from his seat, moving carefully to the table where he had organized the documents. He opened the briefcase again, taking out a series of neatly labeled files and photographs. Everything was methodical, precise, and professional. The opposing counsel, still slightly taken aback by the teenager's opening statement, quickly gathered his own documents. He exchanged a glance with his assistant, acknowledging silently that the challenge ahead was unlike any other. He had faced smart opponents before, clever adults who relied on years of experience, but this teenager had the precision of someone far older. He had to be careful. The teenager began presenting the first piece of evidence. It was a document that clearly supported his client's position. He spoke slowly, deliberately ensuring that each word was understood. "Your Honor, this document confirms that the timeline of events is consistent with our claim," he said. He placed the paper on the evidence stand so that everyone could see it clearly. The judge leaned forward slightly, scanning the document. The teenager continued, pointing out key details that were easy to miss but crucial to understanding the case. "If we look at this paragraph, it is clear that the opposing party has overlooked a significant detail that affects the outcome." The courtroom murmured quietly. Even the opposing counsel paused, realizing the teenager was not only knowledgeable but had also anticipated their arguments. It was unusual to see someone so young identify subtle points that even seasoned lawyers could miss. The teenager called the first witness to the stand. He approached the process with careful respect, addressing the witness politely but firmly. "Please state your name and relationship to the case," he asked. The witness, a middle-aged professional, answered, slightly nervous under the young attorney's calm gaze. The teenager nodded, listening carefully, his eyes never leaving the witness. He began a series of questions designed to clarify important points. Each question was precise, aiming to extract facts without confusion or intimidation. The witness responded honestly, and the teenager gently guided them to elaborate on relevant details. He avoided any aggressive tactics, instead relying on clarity and logic. The jury watched closely, noting the contrast between his methodical style and the usual fast-paced, sometimes confrontational courtroom exchanges. The opposing counsel rose to object at one point, attempting to challenge a line of questioning. The judge looked toward the teenager, signaling him to respond. The teenager remained calm, answering respectfully. "Your Honor, the question is directly related to the evidence presented and is necessary for understanding the context of the case," he said. The judge nodded slowly. The objection was overruled, and the courtroom reacted with quiet surprise at the teenager's ability to handle the situation with such composure. It was clear that he understood not only the facts of the case but also the procedural rules that governed courtroom conduct. The teenager continued questioning witnesses, each exchange further demonstrating his preparation and intelligence. He anticipated potential weaknesses in his own case and addressed them proactively, ensuring there were no gaps for the opposing counsel to exploit. Every word was measured, every action deliberate. The courtroom was captivated. The opposing counsel, now fully alert, tried to challenge him more aggressively. "Are you confident that your interpretation of this evidence is correct?" he asked, his tone testing the teenager's knowledge. The teenager met the question calmly. "Yes, the evidence clearly supports our position. I have cross-referenced these details with established precedents to ensure accuracy," he explained, showing that his approach was grounded in thorough research and legal understanding. The jury, who had initially seemed curious, were now clearly impressed. They leaned forward, listening intently to the teenager's explanations. They saw not a child, but a precise, disciplined legal mind at work. Even some of the spectators, who had come expecting routine proceedings, were amazed by the clarity and skill on display. As the examination of witnesses continued, the teenager skillfully linked each testimony to the evidence he had presented. He created a narrative that was coherent, logical, and compelling. He never rushed, never faltered, and never appeared arrogant. His humility, combined with brilliance, made a deep impression on everyone present. The judge, observing the proceedings, felt a mixture of surprise and admiration. He had underestimated the teenager at first, assuming that age and appearance dictated ability. Now he was forced to reconsider. Here was someone who could think critically, argue effectively, and maintain composure under scrutiny. The judge tapped the gavel lightly, a subtle acknowledgement of the young attorney's skill. The opposing counsel, realizing that a simple strategy would not work, adjusted his approach. He asked more complex questions, attempting to test the teenager's depth of understanding. The teenager answered each question with poise, providing clear reasoning and citing legal principles where necessary. He didn't just respond, he explained, teaching the courtroom the connections between law, evidence, and logic. Every answer he gave was met with quiet nods from the jury and murmurs of approval from the spectators. The courtroom atmosphere had shifted entirely. The teenager was no longer a curiosity. He had become the center of attention, commanding respect and admiration. During a brief recess, the courtroom buzzed with whispers. People discussed the teenager's skill, his preparation, and his composure. Even the opposing counsel acknowledged, in quiet conversation with an assistant, that he had underestimated his young opponent. The teenager had not only argued effectively, but had also reshaped expectations. When the trial resumed, the teenager returned to the stand with calm determination. He presented additional evidence, photographs, and documents, each carefully explained. He drew connections between different pieces of evidence, highlighting inconsistencies and supporting his client's position. Every explanation was clear and concise, avoiding unnecessary complexity while demonstrating depth of understanding. The judge, now fully attentive, occasionally interjected to clarify points for the record. The teenager responded respectfully, explaining his reasoning and ensuring that the courtroom understood the significance of each piece of evidence. The process was slow and methodical, but the effect was powerful. By the time he had presented half of his evidence, the courtroom atmosphere had completely transformed. The jury was engaged, the spectators were intrigued, and the judge was genuinely impressed. The teenager's calm authority and methodical approach had earned respect. Even the opposing counsel, while determined to challenge him, could not help but acknowledge the exceptional preparation and intelligence on display. As the day progressed, the teenager's questioning of witnesses became more sophisticated. He noticed details that others might overlook, subtle inconsistencies in testimony, and overlooked points in the evidence. He used these observations to strengthen his case, always with a careful, respectful approach. His calm demeanor contrasted with the growing tension of the opposing counsel, who struggled to adapt to this unconventional challenge. The judge observed all of this closely, taking mental notes on how the teenager managed the courtroom. He realized that this was more than just a young attorney. It was a rare talent, someone capable of outthinking experienced professionals while maintaining humility and respect. By the end of the day, the courtroom had witnessed a remarkable transformation. What began as skepticism and amusement had shifted to admiration and engagement. The teenager had not only presented evidence effectively, but had also changed the perceptions of everyone present. Age, appearances, and assumptions had been challenged by preparation, intelligence, and calm authority. As Part 2 concluded, the stage was set for the next phase of the trial. The teenager had shown his capability to handle witnesses, present evidence, and respond to challenges with poise and skill. The courtroom was no longer skeptical. It was attentive, engaged, and ready to witness the next chapter in this extraordinary case. The young attorney had proven that brilliance can appear in the most unexpected forms, and that careful preparation, intelligence, and respect can command attention and earn admiration in even the most challenging environments. The courtroom had grown silent after the morning sessions. The jury leaned forward. Witnesses shifted nervously in their seats, and the judge's eyes occasionally flicked toward the teenager at the counsel table, as if watching a master at work. There was a tension that hadn't been there before, a subtle energy that filled the space. The audience sensed that something remarkable was unfolding. The young attorney had moved from being a curiosity to the center of attention, and his next moves were about to reveal even more. The teenager carefully opened his briefcase, pulling out a set of documents and photographs that he had labeled with precision. He placed them on the table, arranging them in the exact order he intended to use. His movements were deliberate and calm, almost meditative, showing his thorough preparation. He looked at the judge with steady eyes, ready to continue presenting his case with skill and focus. The judge, still maintaining his formal authority, leaned forward slightly. There was a subtle change in his demeanor, a hint of curiosity mixed with astonishment. He had listened carefully to the teenager's arguments and questioned some of his points, but now he seemed to recognize that this was no ordinary young person in his courtroom. He remained cautious, however, unwilling to let his surprise show too openly. The teenager began presenting a new set of evidence, one that would test the understanding of everyone present. He carefully explained the relevance of each document, connecting the details with previous testimony. He spoke slowly, ensuring clarity, and occasionally paused to allow the jury and the judge to follow his reasoning. His voice was calm, firm, and articulate, commanding attention without demanding it. As he detailed the connections between different pieces of evidence, the judge's expression shifted. There was a moment of hesitation, a pause where he realized that the teenager was demonstrating a level of legal knowledge far beyond his years. He leaned back slightly, considering the implications. Could it be that this young attorney had more experience and insight than anyone had anticipated? The opposing counsel attempted to interrupt, rising to object. "Your Honor, this line of questioning seems speculative. We need to ensure relevance," he said, trying to regain control. The teenager, without raising his voice, responded with precision. "Your Honor, the connections I am presenting are directly supported by the evidence and are essential to understanding the context of this case. I am not speculating. I am analyzing based on documented facts." The judge paused, then nodded slowly. The objection was overruled. The courtroom watched in quiet amazement. Here was a teenager, responding to challenges with the poise of a seasoned attorney, dismantling assumptions and asserting authority without arrogance. The jury members exchanged glances, acknowledging the skill on display. Even the opposing counsel, though determined to challenge, could not ignore the clarity and depth of the teenager's reasoning. As the case progressed, the teenager introduced a particularly complex legal argument. He referenced statutes and precedents that were not commonly cited in cases of this nature. His explanation was thorough, connecting the law to the evidence in a way that was logical and compelling. He paused occasionally, allowing the jury to absorb the information, and then continued with meticulous care. The judge's eyebrows rose slightly, a subtle sign of surprise. He had been skeptical at first, assuming the teenager's youth would limit his understanding. Now, however, he found himself genuinely impressed. The courtroom, once filled with whispers of doubt and amusement, had become a space of focused attention and respect. The teenager had taken control not through force or theatrics, but through intelligence, preparation, and a calm, confident presence. As the teenager concluded this segment of his argument, he leaned slightly forward, his eyes sweeping across the courtroom. He paused for effect, letting the weight of his words settle in. The judge leaned back, a faint smile appearing at the corner of his mouth. There was no longer any doubt this was a rare talent, someone who could challenge even the most experienced legal professionals. It was at this moment that the teenager decided it was time to reveal a part of his identity that had been kept hidden until now. With a calm, steady voice, he addressed the judge. "Your Honor, there is something important that the court should know. I am not merely a student or an observer. I am a licensed attorney, and I have been practicing for several years. I have taken this case under a disguised identity to ensure that my abilities are evaluated solely on merit and not on appearance or age." A hush fell over the courtroom. The judge blinked, momentarily speechless. The jury and spectators were equally stunned, their eyes wide with disbelief. The opposing counsel's mouth opened slightly, unable to form a response immediately. The teenager's calm revelation had shifted the atmosphere entirely. What had been extraordinary was now almost unbelievable. The judge regained composure, tapping the gavel lightly on the desk. This is highly unusual," he said, his voice a mixture of surprise and curiosity. "You are telling the court that this entire presentation, your arguments, your questioning of witnesses, was done under a concealed identity?" The teenager nodded, maintaining his calm demeanor. "Yes, Your Honor. My intention was to ensure that my work speaks for itself without any bias based on my age or appearance." The courtroom reacted with a mixture of amazement and admiration. The jurors whispered among themselves, witnesses shifted in their seats, and spectators leaned forward, trying to absorb the revelation. Even the opposing counsel, though still processing the news, could not hide a small nod of respect. The teenager had not only argued with intelligence and preparation, but had also demonstrated extraordinary foresight in managing perception. The judge's expression shifted further. His initial surprise was now tempered with a growing respect. He had underestimated the teenager, and he now understood the depth of the talent before him. The courtroom atmosphere had changed completely. What had begun as skepticism and mockery had transformed into acknowledgement and admiration. The teenager had proven that assumptions based on age or appearance could be misleading, and that true skill and preparation could command attention, regardless of conventional expectations. The teenager continued with the case, now fully recognized as a licensed attorney. His arguments became even more precise, each point carefully connected to the law and evidence. The judge listened intently, occasionally asking clarifying questions but no longer doubting the teenager's competence. The jury followed closely, impressed by both the skill and humility displayed. The opposing counsel adjusted his strategy, now treating the teenager with the respect due to a seasoned professional. He asked more detailed questions, hoping to test the depth of knowledge and critical thinking. The teenager responded methodically, providing clear reasoning, citing legal principles, and demonstrating a comprehensive understanding of the case. The courtroom was captivated, recognizing the extraordinary abilities of the young attorney. As the day progressed, the courtroom witnessed the teenager skillfully dismantling weak arguments, reinforcing his client's position, and presenting evidence in a coherent, persuasive manner. Every action was deliberate, every word carefully chosen. The judge, once skeptical, now occasionally nodded in acknowledgement, while the jury absorbed the clarity and logic of the presentation. By the end of Part 3, the courtroom had undergone a remarkable transformation. The teenager had revealed his true identity, turning astonishment into admiration. Skepticism and doubt had been replaced with respect and engagement. The stage was set for the next phase of the trial, where the young attorney would continue to demonstrate his brilliance, outsmarting expectations and leaving a lasting impression on everyone present. The lesson was clear: appearances can be deceiving, and true talent can emerge in the most unexpected forms, reshaping perceptions and earning recognition through skill, intelligence, and calm authority. The courtroom atmosphere had shifted dramatically after the teenager's revelation. The initial shock of learning he was a licensed attorney had settled, and a new energy filled the room. Respect and anticipation replaced disbelief. The jurors leaned forward, eyes focused on the young attorney, eager to see how he would continue. Witnesses seemed slightly more at ease, yet fully aware of the precision and intelligence guiding the questions they would face. Even the judge, who had initially approached the situation with skepticism, now observed closely, acknowledging the exceptional skill before him. The teenager reopened his briefcase, methodically organizing the next set of documents. Each folder, each photograph, each note had been meticulously prepared for this moment. He moved with calm assurance, fully aware of the eyes upon him but never allowing attention to distract him. Every action demonstrated discipline and thoughtful preparation. The courtroom now recognized that his youth was not a limitation, but a surface trait that masked a deep, practiced brilliance. The judge tapped the gavel lightly, signaling for proceedings to continue. "Proceed," he said, his tone formal but tinged with genuine interest. The teenager stood, glancing briefly at the jury, then back to the judge. His opening words were deliberate, designed to ensure clarity and impact. "Your Honor, members of the jury, we will now examine further evidence that provides a comprehensive understanding of the case and supports our position." He began presenting new documents, each tied to specific aspects of the case. His explanations were clear, logical, and methodical. He connected each point seamlessly to previous testimony and evidence, creating a cohesive narrative. His voice was calm yet commanding, capturing attention without any need for theatrics. The courtroom listened intently, captivated by the coherence and depth of his reasoning. The opposing counsel, a seasoned lawyer accustomed to controlling proceedings, found the teenager's methodical precision challenging. Attempts to disrupt or challenge were met with calm, well-reasoned responses. Each objection was addressed with respect and clarity, leaving little room for manipulation or confusion. The teenager's command of both the evidence and the procedural rules demonstrated a level of sophistication beyond his years. Witnesses continued to provide testimony, but under the teenager's questioning, the process became precise and revealing. He asked pointed questions designed to elicit relevant information while avoiding unnecessary pressure or intimidation. Each answer was analyzed, referenced back to evidence, and strategically applied to reinforce his argument. The jury watched, impressed by the careful attention to detail and the logical progression of his inquiries. The teenager's questions were not only about gathering facts but also about revealing deeper truths that might otherwise be overlooked. He noticed subtle inconsistencies in testimony and gently guided witnesses to clarify or expand upon their statements. Each exchange was handled with patience and focus, emphasizing accuracy and understanding rather than spectacle. His approach built credibility with both the jury and the judge, reinforcing the perception of a skilled, mature attorney. At one point, the judge interjected with a question of clarification. "Can you explain the significance of this evidence in simpler terms for the record?" he asked, maintaining authority but acknowledging the effectiveness of the teenager's presentation. The teenager nodded, calmly addressing the question with precision and clarity. "Your Honor, this evidence demonstrates a clear sequence of events that aligns with our client's position. It directly addresses the points raised by the opposing counsel and confirms the credibility of the testimony presented." The courtroom absorbed the explanation, and the jurors nodded in understanding. Even the opposing counsel appeared slightly unsettled, realizing that the teenager's ability to present complex information in an accessible manner was a formidable skill. The atmosphere was no longer one of surprise or skepticism, but one of active engagement and thoughtful consideration. The teenager then shifted focus, calling attention to additional evidence that required careful examination. He presented photographs, documents, and other materials, connecting them to previous testimony. Each connection was made with logical rigor, ensuring that the jury could follow the progression of ideas without confusion. His calm authority and structured approach made the complex information manageable and compelling. Throughout this process, the teenager balanced confidence with humility. He did not boast about his skills or knowledge. Instead, he let the evidence and his reasoning speak for themselves. This approach further endeared him to the jury and spectators, who were drawn to his combination of intelligence, composure, and respectfulness. The judge, observing closely, occasionally asked questions to clarify points for the record. Each time, the teenager responded with thoughtful, well-articulated answers. The judge's initial skepticism had completely transformed into recognition of the teenager's talent. The courtroom was no longer focused on age or appearance. Attention was fully on competence, preparation, and the ability to present a case with clarity and effectiveness. As the session continued, the teenager strategically summarized the key points of the evidence, reinforcing the logical connections between documents, testimony, and legal principles. He highlighted areas where the opposing party's case lacked sufficient support, doing so with tact and respect. The jury absorbed these observations, appreciating the clarity and precision with which the teenager outlined the case. The opposing counsel attempted to challenge some points, but each effort was met with calm, logical responses. The teenager addressed objections with evidence and legal reasoning, demonstrating both understanding and composure. The courtroom witnessed a rare blend of preparation, intellect, and strategy. The teenager's approach was not aggressive but assertive, earning admiration from everyone present. Throughout Part 4, the courtroom dynamic continued to evolve. Respect for the teenager became universal. Jurors were fully engaged, witnesses responded clearly, and the judge acknowledged the skill and preparation on display. Even those who had doubted him initially were compelled to recognize his extraordinary talent. The teenager had successfully shifted perceptions, turning assumptions about age and appearance into a powerful lesson about ability and preparation. By the end of the session, the courtroom had experienced a complete transformation. What had begun as disbelief and amusement had evolved into focused attention, respect, and admiration. The teenager had fully demonstrated mastery over the presentation of evidence, questioning of witnesses, and the articulation of complex arguments. His calm authority and structured approach had commanded attention, reshaping the expectations of everyone present. As Part 4 concluded, The stage was set for the final phase of the trial. The teenager's skill, intelligence, and preparation had left an indelible mark on the courtroom. The audience, the jury, the opposing counsel, and even the judge were now fully engaged, ready to witness the resolution and the demonstration of brilliance that had been carefully unfolding. The courtroom had learned a vital lesson. True talent transcends appearances in preparation, clarity, and humility can command respect in even the most challenging environments. The courtroom was filled with a quiet tension as the final phase of the trial began. The jurors, witnesses, and spectators were now fully attentive, having witnessed the remarkable abilities of the young attorney over the previous sessions. The judge, who had once approached the case with skepticism, now watched intently, clearly aware that this teenager had reshaped expectations and earned genuine respect. The atmosphere was charged with anticipation, as everyone understood that the trial's resolution would be both compelling and memorable. The teenager stood at the counsel table, his briefcase organized, his notes precise, and his focus unwavering. He began by summarizing the key points of his case, carefully connecting the evidence presented, the witness testimonies, and the legal principles that supported his client's position. His voice was calm, articulate, and commanding, drawing the attention of the jury and the courtroom at large. Every word was chosen deliberately to ensure clarity and impact. He reviewed the main inconsistencies in the opposing parties' arguments, highlighting points where evidence had been misinterpreted or overlooked. He referenced prior testimony, connecting details that seemed minor at first but formed a coherent pattern when examined closely. The jurors leaned forward, absorbing the logical flow of the argument. The opposing counsel listened carefully, realizing that a simple rebuttal would not suffice. The teenager had anticipated potential counter-arguments and addressed them proactively. The judge occasionally interjected with questions for clarification, not out of doubt, but to ensure the record reflected the thoroughness of the presentation. Each time the teenager responded respectfully, providing concise, reasoned answers. His explanations were accessible yet demonstrated depth of understanding, reinforcing the clarity of his arguments. The courtroom atmosphere was one of focused engagement, everyone captivated by the combination of intelligence, preparation, and composure on display. Witnesses were called for final clarifications. The teenager approached each interaction with the same methodical patience he had shown throughout the trial. He asked pointed questions that confirmed key details, resolved ambiguities, and reinforced his client's position. Each response was analyzed and referenced carefully, creating a chain of evidence that was both compelling and indisputable. The jury observed closely, noting the precision and thoroughness of his approach. The teenager then turned to the closing statements. He spoke directly to the jury, emphasizing the importance of facts, evidence, and logical reasoning in reaching a fair decision. He summarized the case succinctly, connecting every piece of evidence to the relevant legal principles. His tone was firm yet respectful, ensuring that his message resonated without sounding forceful or arrogant. The courtroom was silent, every listener fully engaged, drawn to the clarity and intelligence of his presentation. He addressed the potential biases that might have arisen from his age and appearance, subtly reinforcing the lesson that competence and preparation matter more than superficial judgments. Your Honor, members of the jury, my role here is to ensure that the evidence speaks for itself and that justice is served based on facts and the law, not appearances. I trust that you will evaluate this case fairly, as we have presented it, he said, his words resonating with integrity and authority. The opposing counsel delivered their final statement, attempting to reinforce their position. However, the teenager had already preemptively addressed most points, reducing the impact of their arguments. His preparation and foresight became evident, leaving the courtroom with a clear understanding of the strength of his case. The jurors, fully aware of the meticulous logic and evidence presented, seemed increasingly convinced of the teenager's perspective. The judge reviewed the proceedings, acknowledging the extraordinary skill and preparation of the young attorney. He maintained decorum, but his demeanor reflected admiration and respect. The courtroom, once filled with doubt and skepticism, had transformed into a space of acknowledgement and engagement. Everyone present recognized the rarity of the talent they had witnessed. As the jury deliberated, the courtroom remained quiet, the weight of the trial's outcome felt by all. The teenager sat calmly, reflecting the discipline and focus that had defined his approach from the beginning. He did not appear anxious, nor did he seek attention. He simply waited, confident in the thoroughness and clarity of the case he had presented. After some time, the jury returned with their decision. The foreperson stood, delivering the verdict in a clear and measured voice. The teenager's client was vindicated, the evidence and arguments having persuaded the jurors of the validity of their position. A quiet wave of acknowledgement spread through the courtroom. The judge nodded, a subtle smile of respect forming. The opposing counsel, though disappointed, extended a gesture of acknowledgement, recognizing the remarkable skill demonstrated. The teenager rose, showing humility and professionalism as he thanked the jury and the court for their attention and diligence. He ensured that his client was supported, guiding them through the conclusion with calm reassurance. The courtroom, fully aware of the journey they had witnessed, remained attentive, reflecting on the extraordinary combination of preparation, intelligence, and composure that had brought the trial to its resolution. As the proceedings concluded, spectators and professionals alike reflected on the lessons of the day. Appearances could be deceiving, and talent could emerge in the most unexpected forms. The teenager had demonstrated that preparation, clarity, and respect were as powerful as knowledge and skill. His actions had left a lasting impression on everyone present, reshaping their understanding of ability and potential. The judge offered a final acknowledgement, addressing the teenager directly. Your performance today has been exceptional. You have demonstrated clarity, precision, and a level of professionalism that is rare at any age. The court recognizes your talent and dedication, he said, his words carrying genuine respect. The teenager nodded, accepting the acknowledgement with humility. He did not boast or seek praise, but his calm demeanor reflected the quiet confidence of someone who had prepared thoroughly and executed flawlessly. The courtroom had witnessed a rare display of brilliance and integrity, a testament to the power of preparation, intelligence, and human composure. As people began to leave, whispers and conversations reflected on the remarkable events of the day. Spectators recounted the precision and intelligence of the young attorney. Jurors discussed the logical clarity of the evidence and arguments, and even the opposing counsel acknowledged the extraordinary skill they had faced. The trial had concluded, but its impact would linger, reminding everyone present that true talent is not defined by age or appearance, but by preparation, focus, and the ability to think and act with clarity and integrity. The teenager quietly packed his briefcase and prepared to leave, having fulfilled his role with grace and skill. He had transformed the courtroom experience, teaching a profound lesson without arrogance, commanding respect without force, and leaving an indelible impression on all who had witnessed the trial. The story of this trial would be remembered, not just for the verdict, but for the demonstration of brilliance, preparation, and human-centered skill that transcended expectations and inspired all who had been present.